Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. The breaking news today is that the Crimean Bridge has been attacked and seriously damaged after multiple missiles have been targeted at the bridge today, and it appears that a large amount of them were able to hit and destroy the bridge. Earlier in the morning, Ukrainian missiles were detected by Russian air defenses entering the area of the Kerch Bridge, which led Russian air defenses to engage the targets. We can see a picture here of one of the Pantsir S-1 systems located very close to the bridge, firing off some of its missiles in an attempt to shoot down the oncoming air targets, or more so Ukrainian missiles. From what we understand, it was able to shoot down probably one, maybe even two of the missiles. The number is somewhat unknown right now, and of course the Russians are claiming that none of the missiles made it through and they shot down all of them. But the pictures and videos that we're getting from the bridge area appear to be showing that that is not the case, and that a large amount of the Ukrainian missiles have hit the bridge. Moving on into one of our first videos of the bridge itself, right here. This was taken from a beach on the Kerch Strait area, and we can see here that as they're looking at the bridge, there are some very different kinds of smoke or smoke screens that are coming from the bridge. Black smoke and white smoke. The white smoke that we're seeing here to the right side of the video is actually created by the Russians themselves. It is a smoke screen in an attempt to try and mask or conceal some parts of the bridge. Of course, you can see that it doesn't really cover the entire length, and I have a feeling that that kind of concealment is largely ineffective to the kind of weapons that the Ukrainians are using. The other kind of smoke that we have is this thick black smoke. This is not created by the Russians. We have seen multiple videos of the Russians testing out their smokescreen systems, and none of them involved a thick black smoke being emitted from the bridge. This is a clear sign of a Ukrainian hit that has damaged the bridge in that section. We can see as they pan further down the bridge, we can see another smoke screen deployed by the Russians, and way further on down on the bridge, we can see what appears to nearly be two entirely separate pillars of black smoke, one that was just created, and one that has been burning for just a little while, maybe a few minutes. And this is something fairly important to note. This is the first time we've ever seen the Kerch Bridge being attacked in multiple places. From what we can tell, there have at least been two separate areas that have been attacked on this bridge, maybe even a third. Moving on into some other pictures that we could also get some fairly good ideas of where this damage was caused, and it's actually pretty impressive because it's the damage that everyone has been looking for. And I'm going to be moving y'all into this picture right here because the smoke is coming from the railroad bridge. It's not coming from the road bridge where the last attack occurred just about 2 or 3 weeks ago. This thick black smoke is coming from the railroad bridge itself. That means that the railroad bridge, as of today, has also been knocked almost entirely out of action by the Ukrainian military, and the Kerch Bridge is practically unusable on any scale, either for the Russian railroads to operate off of, which is how most of the Russian army's logistics are operated, or for the Russian road transport units to operate from the land bridge, or more so the road bridge. Both of the accesses have been knocked out. The Kerch Bridge as a supply line is gone. At least for a while. We don't know how significant the damage is at this moment. Of course, the damage was caused in multiple places, but we haven't seen anything showing that bridge spans have been knocked into the water or anything similar. So the damage may be moderate, but it's not severe like we've seen on the road bridge multiple times. Regardless, the Kerch Bridge is knocked out as of right now, completely. Not even railroad supplies will be making it across this bridge. And we also got another video showing the multiple hits to the Kerch Bridge. This one was almost in the same area as the last picture was taken. And it shows, once again, this one, interestingly enough, also shows an entirely different smoke layer that is coming from the railroad bridge further down here that we did not see in the other picture. Maybe even indicating signs of a fourth hit. And from here, we can also see clear indications that there have been 3 hits, not just 2, to the bridge. We can see one way down on the second area of the bridge. We can see one kind of on the island, the Tuzla Island that is in the middle of the Kerch Strait, where the bridge also sits. And then we can see the black plume of smoke coming from the railroad bridge. And then there appears to possibly even be a 4th plume of smoke, although it's really hard to tell what hit there and what kind of damage that caused. But it's possible that the Kerch Bridge has been hit in 4 separate locations over just the past few hours. Once again, making sure that the damage is significant enough and spread across such a wide area that even if the damage is moderate or light, it's going to take a long time for the Russians to repair and replace all of that damage, because now they have to go through 4 separate spans and segments and also inspect those areas to make sure that it is still usable as a bridge. But the big news is that this supply line, like we're showing on this map right here, is completely red. There will be no supplies coming through this area of any meaning. Maybe a few tons a day, maybe even a few dozen tons a day if they're really pushing it, but we're not going to see the hundreds of tons or thousands of tons of supplies moving through the Kerch Bridge area that needs to be moved through for everything to operate in Crimea. I can't say this enough, that the Crimean Peninsula is the hub of the Russians' higher functions inside of Ukraine. Their navy operates out of Crimea, and their air force is still operating out of Crimea to a large degree. They're also some of the most resource-consuming units in the Russian military compared to the ground forces, considering that aircraft require excessively large amounts of jet fuel, large amounts of ordnance, and of course the Russian Black Sea Fleet also requires an excessive amount of fuel and ordnance to operate as well. And considering that the Kerch Bridge has been knocked out, and also considering that a large amount of the connections to the Crimean Peninsula in the area of Henichesk in the Chanhar Gap have also been knocked out, that means that Crimea is not getting a trickle of supplies anymore. They have no supplies. The supplies that are inside of Crimea right now are the supplies that they are going to have to work off of for the remainder of the war until one of these supply lines is reconnected. And even then, it will not be bringing in enough supplies to support all of the forces in Crimea. The forces in Crimea will either have to move to other locations. Most likely, we'll see if the Black Sea Fleet got in such a desperate situation, a large portion of it would probably start operating out of Novorossiysk on the Russian mainland, and we may see that the Russian Air Force is moved to other airfields in the area around Krasnodar, Yeysk, or Rostov-on-Don, where we see that most Russian aircraft have been moved to once it was deemed that it was unsafe for them to operate inside Crimea. Because this has already happened before. Russian airfields were attacked in Crimea, and so they had to move them out. And so some of those air squads that were moved out ended up in the Krasnodar to Rostov-on-Don area. And they are still there to this day, although a decent portion of the Russian Air Force has returned and is now operating out of Crimea. Speaking of the Russian Air Force and using up resources, we saw that the Russian Air Force was able to consume an entire $40 million of resources today in a little stunt that appears to have been very well made and very well thought out. You see, the Kaliningrad area, or the Kaliningrad Oblast, was celebrating their little Air Force Day in a way. Also just having a little event to let everyone know how strong and how powerful and invincible the Russian Air Force is, or really the Russian Federation. And we can see right here that the pilot decided to show off his tips and tricks. We can see the jet flying right over the crowd, and then pulling a hard right and up turn, and he goes for the bushes. Now some people are probably thinking, that was a pretty interesting maneuver, very low altitude, and also looks like he was really dedicated to getting very low to the ground. You'd be right. Because in the next little picture we have here, we got to see what the Su-30 looked like after that little stunt. Suffice it to say, the pilots didn't survive. Neither of them ejected. We actually are assuming a little bit that they may have not ejected because the pilots may have passed out in the maneuver. Because if we go back to the video and look at it, we can see something that's very telling that both of the pilots may have ended up over-G'ing and blacking out. Watch the video. So we see the jet fly over, and we see it pull this very hard turn, and then the aircraft never tries to correct itself. And that shows that the pilots may have blacked out. They may have pulled such a hard G turn in that one instance right there that they passed out and they weren't able to recover the aircraft because they weren't even conscious to do it. Because watch how the aircraft makes no corrections whatsoever as it pile drives right into the ground. Also, of course, no pilots ejected, which also shows, considering the situation they were in, they probably had blacked out, because seeing the plane go into an unrecoverable spin like that for a second, that probably would have cued in the pilots to bail out while they could. There are 2 pilots in an Su-30, and neither of them ejected, so that is giving us a pretty good indication that the pilots couldn't even handle the G-forces that they pulled on the plane, and then they didn't recover it. So they lost another $40 million and another pretty valuable Su-30 for the Russian Air Force today due to pilot incompetence. Not anything that we're unfamiliar with. Of course, pilot incompetence is the mainstay of the Russian Air Force. It seems to be more prominent than competence of any degree, and we can see that it's costed the Russian Air Force another Su-30 that will not be used anywhere, either in the Baltic or in Ukraine. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news because while all of this is going on, fun times are happening for Russian forces on the Ukrainian southern front as well in the area of Kherson, as large smoke plumes were seen from Kozachi Laheri today, indicating that there may be some pretty heavy firefights going on in between Russian and Ukrainian forces. When you see the smoke rising from the area over there, it appears that a fire has started. And from what we understand, there are small skirmishes occurring in between Russian and Ukrainian forces near the area of Kozachi Laheri. We don't know why the Ukrainian forces have not extended outside of Kozachi Laheri. They have had the benefit of surprise for about the past 2-3 days, but now it appears that Russian forces are engaging them there, and this may indicate that this is some kind of a diversionary tactic to take Russian attention away from other parts of the front line in this area, or it may also indicate that these Ukrainian forces are tasked with holding the area until a bridgehead can be established, although we have a feeling that a bridgehead being created in this area will be very tough to make. And if it is made, it will be a testament to the Ukrainian engineers' ability to create something out of a situation that is otherwise impossible. But nevertheless, it is great to see that the Ukrainians are even holding Kozachi Laheri for a massive battle, well, more so a moderate-sized battle, to occur in that area. And it does appear that the Russians are largely on the back foot today, not even just on the war itself, but in instances like the Su-30 just pile driving right into the ground and taking out both pilots. Both of those things are irreplaceable, both the pilots and the aircraft. The Russians really don't have the ability right now to train new pilots, because from what we understood, most of their cadre was killed off earlier in the war, because for some reason the Russians decided to take the instructors and also use them in the Russian Air Force. A decent amount of them were shot down in the very opening days of the war. Another thing that's interesting about this as well is that Kerch Bridge has been attacked massively today. We have never even seen an attack on the scale. It's the largest one that's ever occurred so far. And going off of that and seeing how this, of course, unfolded, it's showing that the Ukrainians certainly have the ability, not just in small form anymore, to attack the bridge, but they can launch mass attacks on the bridge that can affect every single section of it, not just one bridge span or one area of the bridge span like we've been seeing over the last attacks. And this is, once again, showing that there is a new age in the war where the Russians are going to be massively overplayed by the Ukrainians because the Russians really don't have the ability to respond to it anymore, or they don't really have a concept of how well armed the Ukrainians are at this point, at least in terms of technological abilities. But with that, that is all of the breaking news of the day. I thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We try and put videos like these out every single day of the week when there's news at this time of day, and I hope y'all enjoyed it. And so with that, I will see you all in the next one.